second problem about it is that as far as the students in the schools are concerned, you know, the adults who work in these schools, people say, well, why can't they work somewhere else? They could, however, you know, when you get into a job, first of all, jobs are scarce. Maybe that's the only job you can find. After working at one of those jobs for a long time, you end up like Max, where you've got a mortgage and all kinds of things and seniority, so it's hard to give that up. And adults are also told to sign a Catholicity agreement in which they agree to behave according to Catholic morals and doctrines. So in a way, they're signing away their rights. However, that completely conflicts with what else is in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is that, you know, should be no discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender. Anyway, the thing is, too, is that within these schools, students who identify as LGBTQ, so lesbian, bisexual, gay, transgendered, two-spirited, queer, those students don't sign a Catholicity agreement. And what's happening in the schools, in a place like Ontario, for example, is that there's a student named Leanne Iskander who's trying to start a GSA, a Gay Straight Alliance, in her school, and is not allowed to. Or if she goes to try to start it, they tell her, well, it should be called a diversity club. So you're not allowed to use the language. And they say, well, it's not a big deal, but if it's not a big deal, then why can't you use the language? So all of the Catholicism, it was really important. What I describe in here, the homophobic bullying, could happen in a public school, regular public secular school. But within a public secular school, technically it's not supposed to happen. There would be recourse for the staff and students if that kind of bullying, harassment were to occur. Whereas in a Catholic school, not so much. Someone like Max, if he got found out, would lose his job. Walter would lose his job. Counselors in Catholic schools are advised to either, you know, just try to ignore the fact. If a student were to come to them and say, you know, a male student were to come to a guidance counselor in a Catholic school and say, I'm gay, the guidance counselor, it would be sort of their job to say, well, you know, love the sin or hate the sin. Sure, you can be gay, but don't practice on it. Or to give them reparative therapy, to advise reparative therapy and say, okay, well, we're going to convert you into a heterosexual. So that's where all the Catholicism came into it. And Catholicism, I mean, you know, it's got a really, really long, troubled, rich history. You know, Catholics have done some tremendous work as missionaries, for example. They've, you know, there's good work has been done, but there's also been a lot of damage done as well. And there were certain rituals and those sorts of things associated with Catholicism that I wanted to borrow. So, you know, in that part of the book where there's the first Monday after Fury and the second Monday after Fury, that's sort of replicating a Catholic, the whole idea of the first Sunday after Pentecost or Epiphany or whatever, the second Sunday after Pentecost, those sorts of things. So that's how the Catholicism got into here.
Was it sort of like a way to take a stance against, sort of bring it into light of your beliefs? And sort of say this is wrong?
Yeah, I didn't want to say it was wrong, but I wanted to say, okay, in a hypothetical situation, this is what could happen. So, you know, I think it's up to, if you're a Catholic reader, it's up to you to decide how you want to go. I mean, I've met some Catholics who have been very moved by the book. I've met some Catholics who like to read the first page and they're out of there. And you know, there's a big debate around the Catholic Church right now where some people are saying, I've met a woman who's quite devout, and she said, you know, the church is in trouble, but you have a choice. You have a choice, which is that you can run away, or you can decide to help put out the fire. You know, so is this about helping to put out the fire? That's one way you could look at it, or is it something that just should not be part of the debate? You know, and I kind of leave that up to the reader to decide.
So you sort of present the issue and let the reader decide for themselves.
Yeah, because, you know, there are all kinds of arguments that could be made. You know, people could say, well, why couldn't Patrick have gotten help elsewhere? You know, why are Walter and Max working in school? You know, all kinds of things like that. So.
Why is there such an emphasis on the nicknames of the characters and not their actual names? Like Unicorn Girl or Dead Boy,
Ginger, yeah.
Tomas.
The nicknames, sorry, usually when I think about the unicorn girl and the goth girl and the dead boy, that's partly Maureen McKinsky's thing, in that she can't remember her students' names, which is something that happens to teachers after a certain point. Or when your classes get too big, you can't remember their names, or if a class is too new, you can't remember people's names. And she's also kind of lost focus of her own life and of all kinds of things. So, you know, she can't, I think she's lost the ability in a way to, I don't know, I have to think about this, but I wonder if she's lost her ability to name things, to categorize things comfortably now that, you know, is she Miss Rule, or is she Mrs. McKinsky? Is she Ms. McKinsky? Like, what is she? And so in her confusion around the naming of herself, I think it's sort of reflected in her kind of shorthand naming of everybody around her.
So more like maybe lessening the appeal of a human individual around her because she can't even describe herself.
What do you mean?
Because if she can't put a title to herself, how is she supposed to give a title to
Yeah,
anybody else?
sure. Yeah. Or in not being able to give a title to herself, she's imposing these titles on everyone else. So the guidance counselors, the puka, and you know, those sorts of things.
What does this book say about you?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Okay. Do you identify with one character over any other in this book?
No. All of the characters are a little bit of me.
In what ways?
Maureen McKinsky is me as an English professor, sometimes feeling like I don't know what I'm doing and faking it and trying to fake it. Walter is me if I were to be a man and gain a whole bunch of pounds and grow facial hair and have problems figuring out what to eat. Max is me at my most prudish and inhibited. Faraday is sort of, I think, what I once was as a kid, you know, which was, oh my God, please let there be magic in this world because it's just too boring and depressing otherwise. I think Fury is maybe the only character who's kind of not me, although, you know, I certainly drew on my own experiences with having my heart broken in order to convey him. So I could go on. Pretty much all of them have a bit of me in them. None of them have more than others, except for maybe Max. I think Max was very easy to write in that he's so uptight, and sometimes I can be pretty uptight. So that wasn't too hard to do.
Why did you choose to have Patrick hang himself and not use any other method?
Because that's what happened in real life, basically. And also the thing in Canada is that it's not that easy to get access to a gun when you're younger, especially a gun with ammunition, unless you have family members who hunt or whatever. And they also say that statistically young men tend to pick methods that work. So they don't, whereas young women or suicidal women tend to go for things that where intervention is possible, so pills or, you know, slicing wrists and things like that, whereas hanging is, you know, unless you catch it when it's happening, it's pretty much done. So I was borrowing from statistics around suicide and the methods that people use, plus what happened in the real life story.
Okay. Why is the cat named Lieutenant Fong?
Why is the cat named Lieutenant Fawn? Lieutenant Fawn, the character from the TV show? Yeah, it's Lieutenant Fawn is the second in command from Sector 6. So Colonel Shakira's second officer, or first officer. And that was to indicate, I guess, the depths of Max's obsession with Sector 6 by, you know, he names his cat after a character. For sure.
Is there any reason why your name, Suzette, is part of Crepe Suzette's name?
Yeah. It's kind of a long story, but what I wanted to do was, okay, let me think about this. Okay, so in the real life event where my partner was in the school of that boy who died, what I noticed
from that, and I think part of the reason why I resisted writing the book for such a long time was because I felt it wasn't my story. And I didn't know him, I didn't go to the school, I'm not a high school teacher, so there are all these things that said, this is not my story, this is not my story, this is not my story. But what I couldn't help noticing was that it was impacting me in a really fundamental way, in that I felt that, first of all, it was altering my writing completely and radically, because I don't write tragedies traditionally, and suddenly here I was writing a tragedy. It also I was also experiencing a strange sort of grief around this. I found it incredibly sad, and I don't think my sadness was unusual. It's just sort of sort of sadness you have when you read about somebody young dying in a tragic way, in a way that you hope could have been prevented, but. So I thought, okay, so that's my place in this narrative, is that I'm sort of an outsider, peripheral character who at the same time is affected. And when I originally started writing this book, the reason it took me 7 years to write, and part of the reason it took me 7 years to write was because I couldn't tell how to tell the story. I couldn't figure out how to tell the story. So I was going to, first of all, tell it from the point of view of, I knew I couldn't tell it from the point of view of the boy who died, but I thought maybe I'll tell it from the point of view of the bully. And then that got pretty boring pretty fast. And I thought, okay, well, I'll write it from the point of view of the sister of the bully who's discovered that, her sibling, potentially participated in this murder. And then that didn't work. And then I started reading around, and I had to do a lot of depressing reading for a few years of books about suicide and tragedy. And what I noticed in those books was that, like The Lovely Bones, or Anne Enright's, she's an Irish writer, she wrote a book called The Gathering, which was quite famous for a while there. I noticed that in those books are structured in that they're about the victim of the tragedy, whether it's a suicide or whatever, and the immediate family and friends. So, the sister, mother, brother, father, and maybe a friend or two, or a spouse. And I thought, okay, I want to do something different, because it seems to me that this kind of death is one that it sort of radiates. It's got a ripple effect, so that people like me are affected by it when I didn't even know this guy. So I felt that what I could do in this book was have a stand-in for me to acknowledge that kind of, I don't know what it is, that kind of relationship. What I wanted to do was to be in the book, but I couldn't be me. But I could be a man who dresses like a woman who has my name. And so it's sort of me kind of doing a tricky insertion of myself into there. It's not working as smoothly as I wanted it to, just because in earlier drafts, Crepe Suzette touches everybody in the book. So there was a scene where she was with everybody at some point, whether it's just passing by them on the street or whatever, and it just got too contrived and artificial. But I kept the name anyway, and I thought, Crepe Suzette's a pretty great name for a drag queen. And I thought it was kind of funny that maybe people would read the book and think that Crepe Suzette is me in drag, because what I found in the past is that with my first book, for example, Moon Honey, there's a character named Carmen in it, and everybody thinks that I'm Carmen. So they look at the picture on the back of the book, which is me, and then they read the book and they say, oh, well, this character is also biracial. This is Suzette Mayr, the author, writing about herself, which drives me nuts, because it's just not true. But I thought, well, what if I have a Suzette in the book, and there's Suzette, there's my picture, and I would love it if people thought, oh, Suzette Mayr is Crepe Suzette, the drag queen, extraordinaire. So.
Could you explain what occurs in the last chapter with the unicorns?
Yes. What do you mean?
We'd just like to know if it's more of a symbolic metaphor of what actually occurred after the suicide of Patrick and the crumbling of everyone's facade, or if it actually did occur in the story.
Oh, okay. The ending is intended. I think readers can take it either way. So they can read it as a metaphorical thing, or they can read it as literal. My inclination is that it's literal, just because throughout the book, Faraday has been telling the reader and telling everyone around her over and over and over again, the unicorns are coming, the unicorns are coming, the unicorns are coming, the unicorns are coming. If the unicorns never came, that would mean that she's just nuts. And that didn't work for me because she's one of the smartest, most perceptive, imaginative people in the book. And so for it to just be, oh, she's just deluded, well, that totally undermines that character completely. The other thing about the ending was that I wanted it to be, a friend of mine read the book and he said that he read it as a sort of statement about the triumph of imagination over education. So the idea that, you can have your book learning and go to your educational institutions, but that's only going to educate you in a certain way. It's only going to educate you so far. And what is also maybe even more important is the imagination, and where that can take you. And that's sort of where the brilliance comes from. It doesn't surprise me that there are so many, not people just stay in school, but otherwise I don't have a job. But it doesn't surprise me that there are people, who are big movers and shakers in the world who are dropouts, like Steve Jobs, for example. And I think it's because for some people the parameters of some or a lot of educational institutions is more limiting rather than a way in which to open up possibilities.